So, hello, Damon. Thank you so much for joining this call. This is on my channel as I'm documenting my journey from 9 to 5 and moving on to creating something of my own, which I am very passionate about and I really love doing that. So here I'm documenting my journey, and as on my journey, I am meeting so many different masters and coaches. You're one of them, and I've learned so much from you after having that coaching from you. So I wanted to record this interview with you about your journey, the lessons you learned, and how you created something called self-concept, which everybody knows. And if you can, before your how your life was and what made you to lead into creating self-concept, we would like to discuss all that and things we can learn from your life journey. And recording this means in future when me and people like me who will be in similar situations like me and would like to learn a few things that will be very helpful from your journey. So that's from saying that I will start this. And Damon, the very first thing we would like to talk is how the self-concept happened, and before that, what you were doing.
Okay, so if you mean self-concept, like I guess the business,
Your business.
that's one thing. I didn't create the model. That was my mentor, Steve Andreas, who created the model. And so that's kind of a long story because I was doing my own business before I focused solely on self-concept as a business. So basically, it started when I was quite miserable. Working or doing a business that I really did not enjoy. I wanted to be my own boss. At a certain point in my life, I'd always worked for other people, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I had probably the best job I had ever had up until that point. And I realized that it was okay. I was going to be fine if I stuck with this job, and I could probably grow with the company, and the money would be good, and my boss was one of the best, probably the best boss I could possibly ask for. But I wasn't satisfied with that, and I realized that I was really making my boss's dreams come true, not really my own, or in a very indirect way. And that's when I decided I wanted to go into business for myself. I sort of knew that that was always going to be something on my trajectory at some point. So I was probably, I don't know, 28, 29 at the time. And I said, okay, it's probably a good time to make that jump. My father is an insurance agent for a well-known company. And so I thought, okay, well, if he did it, I could probably do that as well. So in my mind, I was buying my freedom because that's what I was most focused on. And also my ability to make as much money as I want without a ceiling on that. Because, you know, when you work for a company, they basically dictate how much you're going to make. So I wanted the freedom to make my own hours, be the one in charge, not be able to be fired or laid off, and make as much money as I wanted to make. The only catch was I didn't really enjoy insurance at all. I was nothing passionate. I was not passionate about it at all. So I kind of overlooked that and thought, well, I can get by just on freedom. And I went into it with all the best intentions and gave it my all, and it was miserable, and I wasn't free at all. If you've ever started a business, you know that in order to really get it going, it takes a lot of work. So I was working probably twice the hours that I had worked at my previous job, and I was not making any money. It was the height of the financial crisis. I had moved from LA to Santa Cruz to have this insurance agency. Didn't know anybody, had no referral sources. It was pretty bad. And also the height of the financial crisis. So nobody wanted to buy any of the financial products that we sold, which in your first few years, they push really hard. The company pushes really hard. So about after 2 years of that, I finally broke down and fell into a depression. And this was actually my second depression. My first depression I had when I was in college, or right after college, and I didn't have health insurance at the time. So I reached out to a professor of mine who taught a course called The Philosophy of Psychology. And in that course, he taught us how to hypnotize people. He taught us he taught us about a lot of different modalities of therapy. And then he talked about NLP at the end of the semester. So I was fascinated by all of this, and I figured I could trust him. I felt like he could help me out, and I knew he wasn't going to charge me a lot of money because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And he said, "Yeah, come on in." And in one session, the depression ended. And I just thought that this was amazing, as it probably sounds to most people. And so I thought, well, someday I'm going to have to learn this NLP stuff. Not now, but someday. And so here I was again, falling into a depression about a decade later and just trying to figure out my life. So I went into traditional therapy at this point, and it took about a year for me to come out of it. And I realized at this point that if I didn't change my life and I didn't work on my mental health, I was going to end up right back here in a year, maybe 2 years. So I needed to do something different. And I've always liked physical fitness and health and diet and that sort of thing. And so I started to think, well, maybe if I approached my mental health the same way that I approach my physical health, maybe I could prevent myself from ending up depressed again and also make a better life for myself, just be in general happier and make my business more successful. My marriage was also not doing well at that time. And so I thought, okay, well, how do I fix everything? And so the most effective thing that I had ever used or had ever come across was NLP. And Santa Cruz is actually where NLP was created, the University of Calif- California, Santa Cruz.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and but there wasn't a lot of NLP happening here. I remember when I first got here, I learned that this was the place where NLP had started
Mhm.
when I was in process to move here, and so I thought there was going to be NLP everywhere, and there wasn't. And, like, there was nothing indicating that NLP ever, started here. But there was a training that was going on every summer up at the campus, and I thought, okay, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do this. And the first training that I did was a practitioner course. I just loved it. It felt like I'd come home, like this was what I was meant to do. And after that, I couldn't stop. I found another NLP institute and jumped into their training. And then that same NLP institute had a hypnosis training, so I did that. And
Mhm.
then the summer was rolling around again, and I was up for doing my master practitioner with the same up at the campus. The following summer, things were getting trickier though. My business was doing even worse. I had just had knee surgery, so I was on crutches. We were getting evicted from our home because the person I was renting from was selling the house. All these things were just sort of like falling apart, and I looked at that as maybe I shouldn't attend this training. Maybe I should save the money and not spend the time out of my office. And a friend of mine said, "Well, no, I think that's why you should do this training. You're still needing to you need that support. You need to figure this thing out for yourself." So I went and I did that training, and that's when I had a major transformation, and I realized the what was making me unhappy was my marriage and my business, and those two things needed to change. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll give coaching a try, and maybe I'll give teaching a try because people in these courses kept telling me, well, they kept asking me where did I teach or where did I coach or things like that. And I was like, I'm not a coach or a teacher. I'm an insurance agent. And they were like, you should really give this a try. So I really had no idea what I was doing, but I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I just started teaching out of my insurance office, and people started showing up. And then I also started coaching, and people started, reaching out. And then eventually I started a YouTube channel because I realized I was never going to really make a business out of it unless I had some way of having steady traffic. So I started doing YouTube because, well, another reason why I did YouTube is because all the people around me were tired of hearing me talk about NLP. So I thought, okay, well, I'll talk to a camera and I'll put the video out, and so people who want to hear this will find me. And had to do a lot of learning about YouTube, but as I progressed, I did a video every single day, which helped me get better at it because my first videos were terrible, and my presentation was not good at all. So doing a video every single day really helped with that. So I did that for 8 months. Eventually, after 8 months, I pulled back. But by that time, I had created a following on YouTube. I was getting steady requests for coaching, and people were asking for an online training, which I eventually made. And the rest is history. It just kept building on itself. Eventually, I was approached by someone who was an executive for a major corporation, and he wanted coaching. And we started coaching. We did coaching for a few months, and he was really good. He was really interesting. Like I could tell he had done plenty of work on himself, even his self-concept, and he was aware of that model, the self-concept model that my mentor taught me. And then he disappeared for a little while, and then he reappeared about 6 months later and said, "Do you want to talk business?" And I said, "Sure." And I thought he wanted more coaching. It turned out he wanted to turn self-concept into a business. He wanted to find a way to get it to as many people as possible, because the transformations I had helped him with were so profound that he was like, "Yeah, I want to do this full time. I want to leave my other businesses behind." And that's my business partner, Nate. So we went into business together about that time. It was a little more than 3 years ago that happened. So that's really been my focus for the past 3 years.
What I understand, as you were telling Damon, that although you had you other knowledges, and you had education and all that, but NLP, neuro linguistic program, is something which helped you overcome your challenges. As I talk about myself, right? I have been since my childhood, or ever since I remember, I have been huge into self improvement. I have been reading so many self improvement books. I have done so many other coachings also with the self improvement theories and all that. But most of them fail. I mean, they give the encouragement for some time, but after, as the time goes, those the self improvement, the methodologies or things we learn, they start fading. I mean, that we don't have that enthusiasm as we had in the beginning, as we start something, anything, whether you take a self improvement book or you start working with any coach. What is different in neuro-linguistic program NLP, which overpowers everything you learn from self-improvement, other different methods they teach? What is different here that made such huge change in your life? What is different?
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way. Like I've been into personal development since I was a kid. I remember my father, who was a very religious person, and he focused most of his parenting and his attention on me, trying to like instill these religious views, and which I, because of the pressure, I started to reject it, and so did my brothers. But he would go into his room and he would listen to these old cassette tapes. I would say old because they're old now; they weren't old then. And he would shut his door, and I would hear these voices from the cassette tape, and I was like, well, I wonder what that is. Like that sounds interesting. Later, I would find out he was listening to like Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn. A lot of these, people have been around for a while or have since passed on. And what I kept hearing over and over was this idea that you can change your life and you can change who you are, and you're not just stuck with whatever you've been dealt with. And so that idea was in my head from a very early age, and I did pursue multiple, directions of personal development. And so what I would say about, after having spent a lot of time in personal development and then moving on to NLP, that you can kind of divide up the whole personal development thing into two camps or categories. And one is just like really feel good kind of stuff. And this is where I would say like affirmations and just listening to someone give like a motivational talk or something like that. It feels good, but these things are really not effective, because they disappear very quickly. And in some cases, I would say affirmations are actually more harmful than they are good for you. So there's that category in that camp. Then there's this other category of personal development where it's really focused on discipline and willpower, and the David Goggins kind of attitude of like, you just punish yourself to the point where you do something great or accomplish something great. That might work for some people, and I've made that work. But even when I've accomplished things, when I've done that, I've not liked myself. Like I feel terrible, or I feel like, or I don't feel really fulfilled. I feel like I had to sort of bully myself into doing those kinds of things. So I started to get to a point where I was like, okay, I know those things, I know those paths, I know those directions. For me, they've been dead ends, and I'm not happy with either one of those. One feels good but is very ineffective. The other one feels terrible and it is somewhat effective, but I don't feel fulfilled when I go that direction. So NLP is really it's about understanding the structure of our subjective experience. So science tries to find what is objective truth. And science is an amazing thing for that. I love science. People sometimes say, well, because you do this NLP thing, you must be against science. Absolutely not. Science has been one of the greatest things in the human species, and we've gotten so many wonderful things from science. So I don't for a second turn away from science. It's a wonderful thing. There's something else happening though, and that is no matter how much of we can focus on trying to find objective reality, the truth is you never will, because it's always passing through your subjective lens, how we perceive the world. And so two people can grow up, maybe even twins, we could say, they have the same DNA, they grow up in with the same parenting and the same environment. One of them can be very happy and one of them can be very depressed. So how is that even possible? If we're all living from objective reality, how is that even possible? It's each one is having their own subjective experience. So what NLP does is it says, well, there must be a structure to that. There must be a structure to how you experience reality. And once we can understand that structure, which is mostly unconscious, most of it is unconscious, and for most people, but if we can make that conscious, now we can have choice about it. So like if I'm functioning, and we all do, we function from core beliefs that have been solidified from when we were kids at a very young age, and all beliefs after that kind of branch off of those core beliefs, and we're constantly functioning from those core beliefs. So we don't even know a lot of times why we're making the decisions that we're making, or why things are happening in our lives the way that they're happening. We're definitely creating most of what's happening, in your immediate environment, and we don't understand this. But if we can bring that into consciousness, then we can say, I want something different here. I want to do something different. I want to create something different. I want to feel different. And so once you understand those structures, then you make those changes. And sometimes it's a matter of testing. It's not like you're going to know exactly what to do every single time, but you start making some changes and testing this and finding out, okay, well, if I go about this in a different way, what results do I get? What feedback do I get? And then when I get that, is that the feedback that I want? If not, then I do something different. So in a very general way, that's how NLP is different. It's about understanding your subjective experience of reality so that you can change it.
There are so many questions coming. As you are saying this, I just remember that, when I was doing the coaching with you, there were many aha moments. One of them was the biggest one. There are many biggest, I would say, but one of them was uh, when, I always, from from last 5 years, I knew that I don't want to be into 9 to 5. I want to create something of my own. I want to do something which I'm passionate about, and my business and all that. Although I had the courage to dream, but I didn't have the courage to take actions. And you told me that the courage is not the absence of fear, but although you are still fearful, but go ahead with your taking the action. So when I was doing coaching with you at that time, the most important thing I learned about myself was why I was still not able to do what I wanted to do was the lack of courage. And through that session I understood that being fearful is not important. Like, okay, I am fear, I'm having fear, I have my insecurities, that's fine, but then above that is the courage. And that is very important, and that's what NLP taught me, the courage to take the action. In when you were doing your journey in through NLP, when you were working on your own self, what was the biggest challenge you faced, and what you thought was like, what was holding you, behind? Why what was that one thing or few things you would like to talk, like, that was keeping you, away from creating the life you wanted?
I think it was a few things. It's nice to be able to think about it like there's one thing and you can do a knockout punch and it's all fixed, and it's usually not how it works. Um, I had a belief about, say, relationships that, and it was just sort of a belief that was created when I was very young, and watching the only marriage I was ever really, like upfront exposed to, which was my parents' marriage. And they didn't seem very happy. for most of their life. I think they're much happier now, which is great to see. But when I was a kid, they didn't seem happy at all, and they fought a lot. And I think that I thought that that was just normal. Like it's okay to be miserable. It's okay to not go off and do something else. You got to stick with this, and life is just punishment and misery.
That's what
And
most
I
of us think. That's what
yeah,
most.
and so like if you had asked me these things like out loud, I wouldn't have said that what I'm saying now because it would have sounded crazy. But actually, that was part of what I believed. And so as far as my marriage went, I thought, okay, you just suck this up. And maybe when my kids are, full grown, maybe I move on.
Mm.
But otherwise, it's okay to just be miserable. And then the same was true for money. Well, I had a different thing going on with money. With money, it was, and this was completely unconscious. I didn't know I believed this. I believed that in order for me to make money, I had to do things that made me miserable, and then all the things that I enjoyed doing would never make money. They were valueless and worthless to other people. Now that was two major beliefs that were holding me back, and that's what surfaced when after about a little more than a year of NLP training, but it was like nonstop NLP training, and I was practicing every day, and finally these beliefs sort of came to the surface, and when I realized that, I was like, okay, I think my marriage is done. I'll give it one more shot in therapy to see if it can work out. But you can't change other people. So I had no illusions that I was going to suddenly save my marriage. And then I just knew at that point too that it was like I'm never going to do well in insurance because I really don't like it, and it's hard to stay motivated and ambitious when you're doing something that you don't like. What I later discovered was it's a lot easier to make money doing something that you like, because even when things aren't going well, you're still motivated to do it. And it doesn't mean that your job has, whatever business you're going into has to be your level 10 passion. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that in general, you should enjoy it. And if you think about it, you spend such a huge chunk of your life working. And if that huge chunk of your life is doing something you don't want to do and you're only doing it for the money, that's a long, miserable life, or that's like a huge chunk of your life that is going to be miserable. It's just not worth it. So either go find yourself a job that is at least not miserable. Like I know people who run businesses and they don't mind the I guess the topic of the business or the subject of the business. They like making the money, and that's what they're in it for, and that's great. Um, but they're not passionate about it, but they don't mind it. And so I would say at a very base level, find yourself a job or a business that you at least don't mind. Even better if it's something that you enjoy. And if it's a job that you enjoy, chances are you're going to do well at it, and you're going to make more money. You're going to get raises. You're going to get promotions. If you don't like it, well, then you're always in this sort of avoidant behavior. You're always looking for ways to get out of work. That's never going to, it's not going to work out for you, and it's not going to work out for the company that you're working for, or the boss that you're working for. Now, a business or a job that you enjoy, well, you're going to grow. There's going to be advancement. You're going to make more money. So yeah, I mean, it sounds so incredibly simple, but I just couldn't put that together because I had this deep unconscious limiting belief about money. And so those were the two major things that I understood and changed. And at that point, things were different. Like I was moving in a different direction. And then eventually I met Steve Andreas, and I was still working on these, I guess, more existential issues of trying to figure out my life and what made me happy. And I was kind of clawing at this thing and asking Steve Andreas a lot of questions. And he finally, he said, I can't keep up with your questions. So we got on Skype calls, and we do Skype calls for like hours. And, at this time he was almost 80. And so he was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. I need to go eat. I need to rest. And I was like, apologetic because I didn't want to push the guy. But at the same time, I was just trying to like suck all of the knowledge that he had. And he loved giving it. He really did. And there weren't a lot of people who were following him at the time because for the stuff that he was teaching, you had to work for it a little bit more. A lot of NLP courses, they don't really teach you the full mechanics of NLP because they're afraid you're not going to keep going to the trainings. And it's more about a business, more about making money. Well, when I met Steve Andreas, he was retired. Um, he wasn't ever that interested in money other than, needing it to sustain his life. Um, so anyway, he was happy to teach me, but he then said, "Okay, I think I know what you're looking for." And I was like, "Well, good. That makes one of us because I don't know what I'm looking for." And he said, I created this model called the self concept model. And there's a book that I wrote called Transforming Yourself, where I basically, teach that model. He said, go get the book, read it, do the exercises. If you have any trouble along the way, make sure you reach out to me. So I started reading it and I was just blown away. Like, this is what I had been looking for. This was answering a lot of the missing, or putting in the missing pieces for NLP for me, that I was still not sure of, because I could make NLP work and I could do it most of the time and pretty well. I couldn't tell you how it worked. Um, this book was basically pulling the roof off the whole thing, and I'm now looking down at it and I can see why it works when it works and why it doesn't when it doesn't work, so then I can make corrections to it. And eventually I got to the part where you transform your first quality, and so I chose gratitude because it was very ambiguous for me. Sometimes I felt grateful, that I was a grateful person. Sometimes I didn't feel it. And that transformation, it took about an hour, and I couldn't believe what happened and the way that I felt afterward. And I realized too that how much being ungrateful had set me up for many failures or many falls in my life. Like, when I got to points where I was rather arrogant and prideful and self-important, and which is the absence of gratitude. And I took a huge dive. Like, I lost a job, or I lost something big, or a relationship or something like that. When I was done with that transformation, I mean, I was just kind of like looking around my apartment. I was just like, well, did that just happen? And so I wrote him an email. And I said, here's what I did, and I think it worked. And but here's my report. Here's my summary of all that I did. He was so happy. He came back saying, this is the greatest compliment, that you took what I gave you and used it, and made it work. And he said, maybe you should think about teaching this. And I just kind of froze, and I was like, what? And actually, this is everything that I've been looking for. I was looking for a model that nobody else was teaching. I was looking for a very effective model, because at this point I was, in a sense, competing with my own teachers to be a teacher. Why would somebody come and learn from me whenever my teacher, who's still, my teachers from these trainings are still very active and they're out and about teaching? There's no reason why they would come to me. They would just go to, the person who taught me. But so here was a model that nobody was teaching. And, it was exactly what I was looking for, a very transformative model. And it kind of scared me to the point where I said, I don't know if I can do this. And he was like, well, why not? And I said, I don't know, it seems like it's too big. It's like somebody, says, here's the Holy Grail, and I marvel at it. And then that person says, okay, now it's your turn to pass it on or carry it on. And I'm like, what? So I said, give me a few months where I can make sure that this isn't a fluke, that I can keep testing it. And let me see if I can make it work with other people. So after a few months of doing that, I mean, just my life transformed so fast. I couldn't believe that transforming these beliefs, when you start doing that, you start seeing reality differently, because you're literally changing your reality. You're changing your subjective reality. And that starts to have the effect of, like, certain people start coming into your life that you didn't have before, that are wonderful. And like, all these things just started happening. And that's when I went back to them and said, okay, you're right. Not only do I want to do this, but I feel like I have to do this. It's a calling. And so from ever since then, the self concept model has been the basis of everything that I teach and all of my coaching.
But one of the things, as you were discussing, the challenges you faced was like what I learned from, and even from my own life, as I my previous belief was, yes, I don't want to 9 to 5, but I want to create a business which will give me money. But from you, I learned that if I'm just thinking from that perspective, that I have to do some business to get me some money, then I will eventually I might be successful in the beginning, but eventually that will not fulfill what I want to do. So if I work on the passion I have for my, the things I'm passionate about, if I work on that, create some business for that, that will be for the lifetime. That will be life changing for me. So one question here, like people like me, and there are the times when we don't have the clarity, like what I might be passionate about, this thing, that thing, multiple things, but what actually exact is my passion, I don't know. So in that situation, yes, I want to create a business out of my passion, but I don't know which one I should choose. So in those situations, what we should do?
Well, I think that's it's a valid question because yes, that comes up a lot, and I think you hear this is on the feel good side of personal development. They're like, you got to know what you're passionate about. You got to know what your purpose, your calling is, and you got to have a vision. And they say all these things, but they don't tell you how to have or do these things. And I would say that most of these people who are saying these things don't know how to do it either. And so I was kind of the same way. I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do, or and so how do I figure this out? And I think what people overlook is that they're only thinking about the outcome, finding the passion, finding the purpose, etc. And they're overlooking the process and the adventure and the journey of discovering that, which is far more valuable than thinking that you've arrived and know for certain like what your purpose is um, and what your vision is. What I tell people when they ask me that question, because a lot of people say, "Well, yeah, I don't know my passion, so what do I do now?" And it's like there's a part of us that doesn't want to put the effort in because there's a part of us that's always trying to conserve energy and for that famine or something that may that used to happen thousands of years ago or so, but isn't really happening now. And what I tell people is like, well, then that's your journey. Your journey is to find that, and there's no reason why you shouldn't have a really good time and a fun time and enjoyable time doing that. And it absolutely can be. It depends on how you approach it. If you approach it as this is something you have to do, yesterday, and you're impatient about it, and you're clawing at it, from a place of scarcity and desperation, it's going to be a very, very painful process, and you might not even get there because you might quit. We don't, tend to stick with very uncomfortable, painful things for a long time. But if you think about it as, okay, here's what I don't know. I don't really know what I'm passionate about. I don't really know what my purpose is, but I'm going to take the clues that I have and I'm going to make a hypothesis about this, meaning here's the things that I enjoy doing. I treat all of them as clues. What makes sense for me to try next? And you just make it an adventure. And I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. You have the rest of your life to do this. So if you get to the end of your life and you've done what I'm explaining here, and you still don't feel like you had a sense of purpose or you found what it really was, you can at least look back and see that you lived a very colorful and adventurous life as you went through many years of exploring, and you will definitely discover things. You will discover things about yourself. It will be very enjoyable. There will be ups and downs. Like sometimes, you'll encounter things that aren't comfortable or don't feel good, but it's all part of the process. It's just life. You can't inoculate yourself against anything uncomfortable, nor would you want to. But more than likely, within a few years, you'll start to sort of organize yourself around something that seems to be working for you, that makes sense to you, that feels good, that you feel passionate about, that you're willing to endure discomfort to pursue. I would say the latter is more likely than the former, but even if the former happens, I think that's what people are really afraid of. Well, what if I go after this and I never find it? If you've made it fun and you've made it enjoyable and you've pursued, the things that you really wanted to do, you're going to live a full life. What else, or what else could we really ask for?
That's so true. One thing I know, there's so many things here, but we have limited time. I will. One thing I want to ask you, as I'm on my this journey, when you were going through this, in the place where I am now, when you at one point in your life when you were there, what was your day-to-day life? What were the actionable steps you were taking? I want to know, just because of my personal interest. I want to learn from your journey. What were those few things which you were doing consistently every single day, in order to make you reach where you are today?
Well, I think the beginning was I'm really good. I need like mentors and coaches and teachers, and it's hard now because I feel like they're harder and harder to find. I mean, my main mentor passed away a few years ago, and so I'm all about that. Like I love to take trainings and learn stuff. So for me in the beginning, it was like just learning NLP. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people assume once they get a certificate in their hand, I've learned NLP and then I'm off and moving on. It's like, no, the certificates that are given out today are pretty much useless. They're very rare. Does an institute actually give certificates where they test you and they test your abilities and your knowledge about NLP? Most of the time, it's just, if you showed up, here's your certificate. Sometimes you don't even have to show up. You just show up on the last day, they'll hand you a certificate, even though you've never attended a day. So that wasn't my approach to it at all, because I really wanted to learn this. And in fact, the last day of my first training that I attended, and I was handed a certificate, I remember thinking to myself, I don't know NLP. All I did was had an introduction to it. Now begins the true learning. And so I was practicing every single day all of the techniques that I was taught. I went through my manual 3 times. So for me, the journey began with like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me get a model that I've seen work before, like my professor helping me get through depression in one session, a 1 hour session. So I believed in this technology from the start. And so from there, I was like, I'm going to figure this thing out. I didn't know I was going to fall in love with NLP. I didn't know that I was going to take to it so well, and that would become the thing that I would be teaching and using to coach. But out of that, all of these things started pouring out of me, these limiting beliefs, and then how to overcome them, and then values elicitation. There are a lot of values elicitations to really understand and get clarity about what it was I did want. So this whole thing changed a lot over the years. So first it was just doing NLP, practicing NLP every single day. And then eventually when I learned the self-concept model, I was practicing that every day and then using it with other people. And then the other thing too that I've learned is physical health is extremely important when it comes to your mental well-being. And so I've always had something I've been doing with exercise, a lot of yoga for quite a while. And then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something I do now. I take a lot of walks. I do a lot of journaling every single morning. I journal. That's super important to me because I need to get my thoughts out on paper. And the journaling is just stream of consciousness. Like I don't. It's not about writing it for someone. I just put it all out on paper, and I don't look at it again. It's just that's it. But it helps me reflect on my ideas and my thinking. I do a little bit of meditation. So all these practices I've had to some extent, and they change. So it's not like I have a rigid anything. So in general, have a mental practice is what I would say. Have a journaling practice to reflect back your thoughts. Have a meditation practice, even if it's 10 minutes a day. Always be reading something. Have a book, even if you're just reading 10 pages a day. If you do 10 pages a day, every single day, you're going to finish a lot of books in a year. Most of the time, people don't even read one book in a year because they say, well, I don't have the time. You have the time to read 10 pages. You can just read 10 pages a day and you'll get through a lot of books. And then you can also listen to audiobooks while you walk, while you run, while you do yoga, so there's just make sure you're surrounding yourself with good information. And that could even be YouTube videos or podcasts, what have you. I think, surrounding yourself with good information, surrounding yourself, socializing has been more important to me than ever. I've always been an introvert. And, people say, wait a minute, you can't be an introvert, you're on YouTube. And it's like, oh, yes, you can be an introvert and be on YouTube. But socializing, we know now for sure that one of the ways to expand your lifespan or extend your lifespan is through having good personal relationships. So I think a lot of people overlook that. They're like, this hustle culture. I got to work, 25 hours a day, and I don't have the luxury to socialize. That you're harming yourself. You really are harming yourself. Socializing, good quality time with family and friends, that should be a part of your diet. I mean, it should be essential. And the more I do that, the more productive I become, and the happier I become. So I think that's one of the main overlooked things, especially if you're an introvert. And there are more introverts in the world than there are extroverts. And I think with introverts, a lot of times it seems uncomfortable to do that, and it is. But studies have shown that even when introverts are sort of not forced, but like they're sort of kind of pushed to get out of their comfort zone and socialize and interact, they're always happy after they've done it. At first they're resistant, but they're always happier after they've done it. So if you're an introvert, And just know that if you put yourself out there and you do something that is extroverted, which could be meeting new people or doing social media, or, what have you, you will feel better about yourself when you've completed it. And that's really important.
Awesome. And I will suggest everyone who will be watching this video in future to, of course, go into the Damon Cart's YouTube channel. There's so much knowledge there. I haven't yet seen all the videos, Damon. I'm looking at every single video I'm watching from the beginning, 7, 8 years ago, and I'm watching that, and there's so much knowledge there. So much. It's just not knowledge, but to practically how to do things in day-to-day life. Thank you so much, Damon. I know I have so many questions still coming in my mind. This what 20, 30 minutes interview won't be enough. Maybe next time I have to schedule interviews with you, multiple interviews maybe. There's so
Sure.
much knowledge, vast knowledge you have. So, but for now, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to meet with you next time. Thank you, Damon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, I'd love to come back.